Hi everyone, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Alexandra Conroy. I used to be a corporate lawyer and a partner in the city in London, and I now run my own business as an executive coach for lawyers, trainees, and those of you who are still trying to get into the legal industry. So welcome to my first trainee newsletter video. I am super excited to bring this content to you. You may have noticed that this month's theme is the power of intentionality. So let me start by telling you my intention for these newsletters. First thing I should mention is that the newsletters are intended for and tailored towards trainee solicitors in the UK, which is not to say that they won't also be valuable for other junior lawyers and those of you still trying to get into the legal industry, but you'll just notice that some of the terminology and the content specifically references the training contract process. So my intention really for the newsletters is to provide you with support, encouragement and guidance over the next couple of years of your journey. I know that a training contract can be challenging at times, but it also can be extremely rewarding. And what I'd like to do is help you through that journey so that by the end you can feel confident about your options for the future. So that's really the intention. As I say, each month I'll choose a particular theme, which I think is relevant to you guys and can be practically applied. This month's theme is intentionality. And what I'd like to do before we get into that is first take just a few minutes to give you a quick background about my journey and myself, just so that you have an understanding about where my guidance is coming from. So just to jump into that, I started off my journey as a lawyer at S.J. Berwin back in 2005. I had a fantastic experience there, but when it came to qualification, I had decided that I wanted to qualify into the funds department, and a portion of the team at that time, including the guys that I had sat with when I was doing my seat there, had decided to move to a US firm called Kirkland & Ellis. So I ended up going with them and starting off as an associate at K&E. I was at K&E for around 7 or 8 years, during which time I made partner in 2013. And then a couple of years after that, I made another lateral move across to a US firm called Fried Frank, again with a portion of the team. And I was at Fried Frank for a couple of years. Whilst at Fried Frank, I was acting as the trainee supervising partner. So alongside the HR team, I was responsible for putting together the program, because there wasn't one when we joined at that time. So putting together the program, recruiting the first few batches of trainees and supervising and monitoring the program. I then decided last year in 2017 to step out of private practice and set up my own business as a coach and a trainer for lawyers and trainees, which is where I am now. And it really is my privilege to be able to work with people like yourselves and help you think strategically and progress on your journey. One of my real passions when I was a lawyer was the kind of team training and development and mentoring side. I really enjoyed that. So now I get to spend 100% of my time doing that, which is awesome. So that's who I am. If any of you have any questions about my journey or what I'm doing now, then please feel free to drop me a line. I'm always happy to talk about my experiences to the extent that they can be helpful to other people. So please don't hesitate to reach out. But to move on now to the focus of this month's session, which is the power of intentionality. So I chose this as the first theme for the newsletters because everything else really flows from this. All of your development and growth as a trainee is going to come from a place of being intentional about it. I really saw as a supervisor the difference when it came to qualification between those trainees who had just sort of survived the training contracts and those trainees who have been intentional and strategic about their personal development and their experience as a trainee. There really is a huge difference between the two. So to the extent that you're trying to generate options for yourself at qualification, then you need to really be intentional about your progression. And what I'm talking about, of course, is goal setting. So I would encourage you after this video and going forward at the beginning of each seat to set yourself specific goals that you're going to work towards over the course of your seat. Of course, you'll be making progression on, in many areas just through the process of being there. But what I want you to do is take that up to the next level and be intentional about specific things. There may be goals that immediately come to mind, in which case that's fantastic. If you don't have something which immediately comes to mind, and in any event, I would encourage you to set 2 different types of goals. The first one will be a legal or a technical goal that is specific to whatever seat you're in. So for example, if you're in a fund seat, then your goal might be, by the end of the seat, I will be able to competently lead, under supervision of course, a simple fund transfer process. So that means that I will be able to, understand the technicalities of the transfer process. I will be able to do first cuts of the transfer documentation, and I will understand the typical commercial issues that come up and how we typically respond to those. So that may be your technical goal for a fund seat. It's going to be different in every department. So that is your technical goal. The second goal, and this is really the more important one, is a goal for your personal development and growth. And I say this is important because when it comes to qualification, the firm is not going to be making a decision about who to employ based on, whether they've nailed a closing checklist. That's awesome. But, they're not going to be thinking, this person is definitely going to be worth their salary because I know for the next 10 years we're going to have awesome closing checklists. That's not it. They're going to be thinking about potential, of course. They're going to be thinking, is this person going to be a good 3rd, 4th, 5th year associate? Are they going to provide value for money in that respect? And the types of things they're going to be thinking about is, what's the attitude of this person? Are they enthusiastic? Do they have a growth mindset? Are they hard workers? Do they pick up information quickly? Do they know how to develop themselves? Are they good communicators? Do they have confidence? How do they deal with conflict? I could carry on, but these are the types of broader things that they're going to be thinking about when they're thinking about your future potential. And so your growth on those types of areas is extremely important and relevant to your career longevity. And again, you may have things that immediately come to mind, which is fantastic. If so, those are probably things that you need to tackle first. If you don't, then one of the reasons why I ask you to do a technical legal goal is because there's obviously value in doing that in terms of mastering particular skills for your seat, showing proactive attitude and all of that good stuff. But also, as you work through and set your technical goals, you will notice things that crop up that relate to your personal growth. So for example, you may notice that when you're setting your technical goals, you're limiting yourself to things that you can, for example, work on a solo basis. And you're not pushing yourself to work on things which mean that you are having to work with other people externally, having to speak to clients or external counsel, other things that mean that you're having to communicate externally. And so one of your personal goals from that might be, right, I notice that I'm not pushing myself to be more proactive and communicate with the broader team or the outside world. So maybe that's something I need to work on in terms of confidence or communication. So you'll notice things that crop up. If you still are struggling to think of something, then obviously your internal reviews should provide some useful data. If your internal reviews are not particularly constructive, then it's your responsibility to go out and find good feedback. And we may do a future session on this, but one quick hack, if you're dealing with supervisors who are not particularly good at giving constructive feedback, is to ask them, once you finished a project, what is one thing that I could do next time to perform better? And that's a quick way to sort of give permission to for someone to give you just one thing that you need to work on, so that can provide some useful data. So in any event, that that part of being intentional is taking responsibility. It's your life, it's your journey. No one is going to hand it to you on a plate. So if you want to develop, then you need to be seeking this stuff out and you need to be proactive about it. So I'm sure that you can think of one technical, one personal growth goal. And I would encourage you when you're doing these to be ambitious about your goals. The kind of sweet spot is to feel slightly uncomfortable about the goal that you're setting. If it's, if it's within your comfort zone, then you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough. So I would challenge yourself. I know from my own personal experience that lawyers can often be perfectionists, which can be fantastic because, of course, attention to detail is a skill that lawyers need. But the slight danger with perfectionism is that perfectionists can tend to be wary of setting bold goals because they're worried about the possibility of failure. So I would just, caution you to be aware of that and make sure that that doesn't hold you back from setting goals that are going to push you to achieve more. So be bold. You'll notice that in the newsletter I've included a link to a couple of Tony Robbins videos. He isn't everyone's cup of tea, as I mentioned, but if you're looking for a dose of sort of inspiration and motivation, then I don't think you can help but get that if you watch those videos. So take a look, see if you like them. So that's, the most important step, articulating your goals. If you never do that, then they're not goals, they're just kind of dreams that may or may not come to reality, but probably more likely not. So number one, articulate your goals, write them down. Number two is you need to figure out an action plan and an actual strategy to achieve them. It's no use having a goal with no idea about how you're going to make that happen. So you need to write down and think about your action plan. So for example, if we go back to the transfer process, if you're a funds trainee, then perhaps a couple of action steps would be you need to speak to your supervisor about what transfers you could be a part of during the next 3 months. You need to be proactive in the timeline and thinking about what documents you can draft in advance so that you get some good experience. And perhaps you make a commitment that every time you don't understand something, you figure out the answer, either by asking your supervisor if that's appropriate, or your fellow trainees, or junior associates, paralegals, whoever it might be. There's always a resource to get the information that you need. So those might be some concrete action steps. When it comes to your personal growth goals, it's even more important to be granular and specific, because those goals tend to be broader goals. So if one of your goals is I want to develop my confidence, then if you just leave it at that, it's too broad. How are you ever going to achieve that? So really get specific. What do you mean when you say confidence? Is it that you are not very good at speaking out in team situations? If that's the case, then maybe your action steps are, I make a commitment to speak up at every single team meeting, no matter what it is that I say. Or I make a commitment to speak to my supervisor about a 5-minute presentation I can give on a particular knowledge matter, so that I am forced to speak up in that setting. So be specific, be granular, otherwise it just ends up as too broad to be implemented. So that's the action step. Write it down. It's no good swirling up here. All of the research shows that once you write it down, it's more likely to be action. So get a piece of paper out, old analog style, and write it down. The final piece for your goal setting is accountability. So often where I see clients fall down is where they set these awesome goals, they figure out their action plan, and then they completely forget about them because life happens, right? Often you're working in really busy departments, you can be working long hours, and you have a job to do, life happens. So it's important to, especially if you have a memory like mine, to remind yourself. So diary invites are my friend. So maybe set a diary invite every month. Maybe speak to your peers or your friends or family and ask them to follow up with you. But the basic principle is that you need to be able to, during your period for which you want to accomplish your goal, you need to assess how have you done so far, what are the next steps, do you need to readjust your goal. If you don't do that, then the end of your seat will appear quickly and you will have got nowhere on your goal. So that last piece is crucial to accomplishing your goals. So that's accountability. So that's the main framework for goal setting. A couple of extra hacks on the end. It's often useful to, when you're setting your goal, think about your compelling reason. So why are you trying to achieve it in the first place? For a lot of you, it will be because you want options at qualification. You want to have shown that you're a proactive person. You want to have conquered some technical skills so that you can show ability in that respect and capability. And you want to have grown in personal growth so that they can see your potential. And the idea is that you want to get a job at the end of the day. But I would encourage you to think about why. Why do you want to get a job? And I'm not talking about the airy-fairy reasons that you include on your training contract application. I'm talking about real stuff that is going to motivate you at 1 a.m. in the morning when you're in the middle of a completion and you need something to get you through. So if it passes the 1 a.m. test, then it'll probably do the trick. For me, salary was important. I know it sounds superficial, but that's okay. It was important to me that I would have financial security, and it was exciting to me that I would have the money to experience luxuries that I had never experienced before. So that was pretty motivating. I also wanted to continue to work for a team that, were super smart and funny people. And that whole environment and industry gives you the opportunity to do that. And that was really exciting for me. So that was another one of my reasons. Those may resonate with you. Find your own, but write them down next to your goals so that you can go back to them when you're going through a challenging time or when you're reassessing. The final thing, which I won't spend too much time on now, in fact, we may do a future session on this, but it can be super important in goal setting, and that is the concept of limiting beliefs. So if you Google this, then you'll find a whole lot of useful resource on this. But essentially, limiting beliefs are unconscious beliefs that we have about the world or who we are as a person. And they're underlying beliefs that have often developed during childhood and now have an impact on how we see the world and how we present ourselves and the things that we do as an adult in the world. So, for example, if you grow up in an environment which is traumatic or unstable or unsafe, then you may have an underlying belief that the world is not a safe place. And as an adult, that can present itself and impact you in a variety of different ways. But one of them might be that you are afraid of taking risks in your life or in your business. So that's one example. Another example might be that you have an underlying belief that you are not a confident person, which could have been generated any number of ways in your early life. But now may present itself. There are several ways I'm sure you can think of as an adult, and they may, you may not push yourself forward for promotions or progression. You may not speak up in meetings because you have this kind of belief about your identity that you're just not a confident person. And so that can obviously have some real impact. And so I think at this stage, what I would just like to encourage you to do is notice as you're setting your goals, any thoughts that come up that limit your feelings about your ability to accomplish those goals. So if your goal is to be more confident, then are you noticing a thought cropping up around, oh, I'm not a confident person, or I'm a shy person? When did you create that identity for yourself, and what impact is it going to have? So just start to notice that. You will see that in the newsletter I've included a link to a podcast which talks about limiting beliefs, so you may want to listen to that if you have time. But at this stage, just bring them to awareness, because that's the first step in noticing them, being aware of them, so that you can then start to address them, reframe them, ask yourselves whether they're true and whether they're serving you. And if the answer to any of those two questions is no, then you need to think about how you're going to address them going forwards. One interesting way of thinking about that is, once you've identified them, visualize your life without them. How would you be different? How would you be acting differently? Where would you be in your life if you didn't have those limiting beliefs? So that's a real interesting topic, and it's some really good stuff that I work with one-on-one with my clients, because they can be real blockers to growth. So just start noticing them as you do these goals exercises. So that's it for the topic for today. I really encourage you to get into the habit of setting yourself specific goals for each seat of your training contract. You will know already, I'm sure, that a legal career is one of continuous growth. You know, you're going to nail being a trainee, and then suddenly you're going to be thrown into a junior associate role, and then suddenly you're going to be thrown into a mid-level associate role where you're having to learn how to delegate effectively, manage teams. And then believe me, when you get to partnership level, you know, you're still learning new things all the time, and suddenly half of your job is business development and pitching and recruitment and all sorts of new things. So you cannot succeed in a legal career without developing a growth mindset. And a hugely important part of that is goal setting. So it's an important habit to get used to at this stage. So I encourage you to go away and set some awesome goals. Before we go quickly, a few things that I just wanted to mention. In future videos, I would like to do a kind of quick fire Q&A round. So if you've got any practical questions that you maybe don't want to take to your supervisor or would just like my perspective on, then there's a Q&A button in the newsletter. So if you just hit that and send me your questions, then I will try to deal with as many as I can in future videos. Secondly, if you want to work with me one-on-one, then please don't hesitate to drop me a line and we can talk about options. You can reach me on my email, which is alex@alexandra.co.uk. Sorry, Alexandra Conroy, forgetting my name, alexandraconroy.co.uk, or you can reach me via my website, which is www.alexandraconroy.co.uk. Finally, if you have fellow trainees at your firm or who you went to law school with who you think would find this content valuable, then please feel free to forward the email onto them. That is absolutely fine. And then they can get in touch with me and I will add them to my subscriber list. So that's it for this month. I hope you have found the content valuable. I am excited about the awesome goals that you will set and look forward to seeing you next month. Bye.